The alarm screamed through the command center of Nexus Prime Station like a dying animal. Admiral Zexithai had heard that sound only 3 times in his 40 years of military service, and each time it meant the same thing. Something impossible was happening. The Kethvari Admiral's 4 eyes focused on the main display screen, his blue skin turning pale as he watched the readings. The numbers made no sense. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist, movement patterns that broke every law of physics he knew, and most terrifying of all, a ship that appeared to be there without actually arriving. "Report," Zexithai commanded, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. Lieutenant Veltar, a young Syrian with nervous tentacles twitching around his head, stammered as he read from his console. "Sir, we have an unregistered vessel at coordinates 77 Mark IV. It's unlike anything in our databases." "Show me," the Admiral ordered. The main screen shifted to display the intruder. What Zexithai saw made his blood freeze. The ship was wrong. Not just unfamiliar, but wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Its hull seemed to bend light around itself, creating shadows where there should be none. Strange markings covered its surface, symbols that appeared to move when no one was looking directly at them. The vessel was roughly the size of a Council destroyer, but its shape defied every principle of starship design. Instead of the smooth, elegant curves that marked all civilized spacecraft, this thing looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star and hammered into shape by angry gods. "How did it get past our outer sensors?" Zexithai demanded. "Sir, that's just it," Veltar replied, his tentacles now wrapped tightly around his neck in distress. "It didn't. One moment our screens were clear, the next moment it was just there. No hyperspace signature, no energy trail, no transition phase. It appeared like someone had turned on a light switch. Chief Science Officer Moradin, an elderly Zentauran with scales that had turned silver with age, looked up from her readings with confusion written across her reptilian features. "Admiral, this is impossible. According to our instruments, that ship exists in 7 different dimensions at once. It's occupying the same space as normal matter, but somehow not interfering with it." "Explain that in words I can understand," Zexithai growled. "Imagine a ghost that can choose when to be solid," Moradin said slowly. "That ship is there, but it's also not there. Our targeting computers can't lock onto it because they can't decide what they're looking at." The Admiral felt a chill run through his body. In 4 decades of serving the Galactic Council, he had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. He had witnessed battles between species with technology that bordered on magic, but this was different. This felt like looking into the face of something that didn't belong in their universe. "Communications, hail that vessel," he ordered. "Standard first contact protocols." Communications Officer Yilneth, a tall, thin being from the crystalline worlds, worked at her console for several minutes before shaking her head. "Sir, I can't establish a connection. It's not using any known communication frequencies. In fact, I'm not sure it's using frequencies at all. The signals coming from that ship are..." She paused, searching for words. "They're aggressive, sir. They're actually causing interference with our own systems." "What do you mean, aggressive?" "The signals don't just carry information. They carry something else. Something that makes our computers unhappy. 3 of my secondary communication arrays have shut themselves down rather than process the incoming data." Zexithai's 4 eyes widened. In all his years, he had never heard of a communication system that could frighten machines. "Are they trying to hack us?" "No, sir. This is something different. It's like their communication system is so alien that our technology is having an allergic reaction to it." The Admiral turned back to the main screen, studying the mysterious vessel. As he watched, the ship began to move. Not in the graceful, predictable patterns of civilized starcraft, but in short, violent bursts that defied inertia. It would stop completely, hover motionless for a few seconds, then suddenly shoot forward at impossible speeds before stopping again with no visible deceleration. "Tactical analysis," Zexithai commanded. Commander Brexnall, the station's weapons officer, was a veteran warrior from the proud Drakmarian warrior caste. His people had conquered 6 systems before joining the Council, and fear was not in their vocabulary. But when he spoke, his voice carried a tremor that Zexithai had never heard before. "Sir, I can't get a proper reading on their defensive capabilities. Every time our scanners try to analyze their hull, they get conflicting data. According to our instruments, that ship is simultaneously heavily armored and completely unprotected. It's showing energy levels that suggest it could power a small moon, but also readings that indicate it's running on backup power. That's impossible. Yes, sir. That's what makes it so terrifying. The unknown vessel suddenly changed course, heading directly toward Nexus Prime Station. Its movement was predatory, like a shark that had just caught the scent of blood in the water. All stations, red alert, Zexthai commanded. Deploy defensive formations. Prepare for possible hostile action. Around Nexus Prime, Council warships began moving into protective positions. The assembled fleet represented the finest military technology in known space. 27 destroyers, 12 heavy cruisers, and 3 dreadnoughts that could reduce entire continents to ash. It was enough firepower to conquer most solar systems. But as the strange vessel approached, Zexthai felt none of the confidence that such overwhelming force should provide. Something about the way the ship moved suggested that it viewed the entire Council fleet as nothing more than an interesting obstacle. "Sir," Veltar called out, his tentacles now turned completely white with fear. "The intruder is broadcasting something. It's not on any standard frequency, but our computers are translating it automatically. Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice filled the command center. It was unmistakably alien, but not in the way they were used to. Most alien voices, when translated, sounded calm and rational. This voice sounded like it was barely containing violence. "This is Captain Sarah, Chen of the Terran vessel Terror's Edge. You have 30 seconds to clear our approach vector before we clear it for you." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Zexthai felt his skin turn even paler. In 40 years of diplomatic contact with hundreds of species, he had never heard such casual arrogance. "Terran?" Chief Science Officer Moradin looked confused. "I've never heard of that species. They're not in any of our databases." "Human," Communications Officer Yilneth said quietly. "Terran means human. I've seen references in some of the old exploration reports from the Outer Rim. They're supposed to be a primitive species that barely discovered fire a few thousand years ago." "That ship doesn't look primitive," Commander Brexnell observed grimly. Zex. Ty made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Open a channel. This is Admiral Zexthai of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet. You are in violation of Council space. Identify yourself properly and state your intentions." The response came immediately, and it wasn't words. The human ship's weapons powered up. Zexthai had seen weapons charge before. The buildup of energy in Council weapons was predictable, measurable, and followed known patterns. The Terror's Edge was different. The energy buildup didn't follow any pattern at all. It pulsed and writhed like something alive, and the readings on his instruments kept changing every second. "Sir," Commander Brexnell said, his warrior's pride now completely replaced by fear, "I don't know what kind of weapons they have, but they're drawing more power than our entire station uses in a day." "How is that possible? That ship isn't big enough to house a power source that large." "I don't know, sir, but whatever they're powering up, it's making our shields resonate in frequencies that shouldn't exist." The human captain's voice came through the speakers again, and this time there was something in her tone that made every being on the bridge take a step backward. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was the sound of someone who was genuinely looking forward to violence. "Admiral Zexthai, you have 20 seconds left. I suggest you use them wisely." "This is Sovereign Council space," Zexthai replied, trying to project authority he no longer felt. "You have no right to make demands here." 15 seconds, came the response. The Admiral looked around his bridge at the finest officers in the Council fleet, beings who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Every one of them was looking at him with the same expression, desperate hope that he would make the right decision. The problem was, he had no idea what the right decision was. "Sir," Veltar whispered urgently, "long-range sensors are picking up more contacts. Dozens of them, all showing the same impossible energy signatures." 10 seconds, the human captain announced. Zexthai's mind raced. If this was just one ship and it was clearly more advanced than anything the Council had ever encountered, what could dozens of them do? The mathematics of the situation were simple and terrifying. "All ships fall back to secondary positions," he ordered. "Clear the approach vector." 5 seconds. The Council fleet began withdrawing, their elegant formations dissolving into controlled retreat. Ships that had never backed down from any enemy in the history of the galaxy were running from a single vessel operated by a species they had never heard of. "Time!" Captain Chen announced, and the Terror's Edge powered down its weapons. But instead of continuing on its original course, The human ship stopped directly in front of Nexus Prime Station. It just hung there in space, its hull continuing to play tricks with light and shadow. Then it began scanning. Sextai watched in horror as his instruments detected scan beams unlike anything in his experience. These weren't the polite, limited scans that civilized species use to gather basic information. These were deep, invasive probes that cut through their most advanced security systems like they weren't even there. "Sir," Moradin said in a voice barely above a whisper, "they're scanning everything. Our defensive positions, our weapons capabilities, our personnel files, our strategic databases, and our systems can't stop them." "How is that possible?" "Their scanning technology doesn't just look at things, sir. It looks through things. It's seeing the quantum structure of our ships, the genetic makeup of our crews, even the thoughts in our computer's memory banks." The Terror's Edge completed its scan in less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes to completely analyze the most secure military installation in Council space. Then it transmitted again. "Scanning complete," Captain Chen announced. "Nexus Prime has been cataloged and evaluated. Threat level, minimal. Recommendation, continued monitoring." The transmission ended and the human ship began moving again, heading deeper into Council space. But before it disappeared from their sensors, one final message came through. "Admiral Zexthai, you made the right choice today. We'll be in touch." Then the Terror's Edge vanished, not by jumping to hyperspace or using any known method of faster-than-light travel, but by simply fading away like morning mist. The bridge remained silent for a long time after the human ship disappeared. Finally, Veltar spoke in a voice that shook with fear. "Sir, what do we tell the Council?" Zexthai looked at the empty space where the impossible ship had been and realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's most powerful military force had just been evaluated by an unknown species and found to be no threat at all. Worse, they had been cataloged like specimens in a laboratory. "We tell them," he said slowly, "that we just met something we don't understand, and that it's not alone." As emergency communications began flooding in from across Council space, reporting similar encounters with other human vessels, Zexthai understood that this was not just a first contact situation. This was the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The humans had arrived, and they were nothing like anything the Council had prepared for. 3 days after the Terror's Edge disappeared from Nexus Prime, the Council chambers on Zenith 7 buzzed with activity unlike anything seen in decades. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered for an emergency session, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, telepathic hums, and translated speech. Counselor Prime Veldara, an ancient being whose crystalline body reflected the chamber's lights and patterns that showed her deep concern, called for order. Her species had lived for over 1,000,000 years, and in all that time, they had never encountered anything like the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. "Fellow counselors," she began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, "we face an unprecedented situation. In the past 72 hours, we have received over 300 reports of encounters with vessels belonging to this human species. Each encounter follows the same pattern: sudden appearance, casual dismissal of our forces, comprehensive scanning, and departure with warnings." Counselor Thexmar, representing the warrior worlds of the Drakmarian Empire, slammed his armored fist on his speaking podium. His people had never retreated from any battle in their 10,000-year history, but even they had pulled back when faced with human ships. "These humans show no respect for established protocols," he growled. "They ignore our territorial boundaries, dismiss our military strength, and treat our most secure installations like tourist attractions. This cannot be allowed to continue. What do you suggest?" asked Counselor Yilnara, whose people had evolved from prey animals and still retained their ancestors' ability to sense predators. "Every military commander who has encountered them reports the same thing. Their technology is beyond our understanding, and their weapons appear to violate fundamental laws of physics." "Surely we're overreacting," interjected Counselor Mordain from the peaceful Zentaran Republic. "These humans must be reasonable beings. Perhaps they're simply unaware of our customs. A proper diplomatic mission should resolve this misunderstanding." Counselor Prime Veldara considered this. The Council had built its power on diplomacy, trade agreements, and mutual cooperation. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, they had successfully negotiated peaceful contact with every species they had encountered. There was no reason to believe humans would be different. "Very well," she decided. "We will dispatch the Harmony's voice under Ambassador Creathan's command. If these humans are truly intelligent, they will respond to proper diplomatic protocol. The Harmony's voice was the Council's finest diplomatic vessel, equipped with every form of communication technology known to galactic science. Its crew was chosen from the most skilled negotiators of 12 different species, trained to find common ground with any intelligent life form. Ambassador Crethan was a Syrian whose natural telepathic abilities had been enhanced with the finest diplomatic implants available. He had successfully negotiated first contact protocols with 47 different species and had never failed to establish peaceful relations. "I understand the situation is unusual," he told the assembled council, "but every species can be reasoned with. These humans simply need to understand the benefits of joining our galactic community." 2 days later, the Harmony's voice approached the coordinates where the Terror's edge had last been detected. The diplomatic vessel was a work of art, its hull decorated with symbols of peace from every member species of the Council. Its engines ran silent, its weapons were powered down, and it broadcast friendship on every known frequency. They found the human ship exactly where they expected, hovering motionless in space like a predator waiting for prey. "This is Ambassador Crethan of the Galactic Council Diplomatic Corps," he transmitted on the standard first contact frequency. "We come in peace, seeking dialogue and mutual understanding with the human species." The response came immediately, but not through their communication system. Instead, 3 unmanned probe ships that the Harmony's voice had deployed for scanning purposes simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there, the next moment they were expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The diplomat ship's crew stared in shock at their screens. The probes hadn't been destroyed by conventional weapons. According to their instruments, the probe ships had been convinced to turn themselves inside out at the quantum level. "What just happened?" asked Crethan's aide, a young Zentauran named Silvera. "I believe," said the ambassador slowly, "we just received a response to our greeting." The Terror's edge began moving toward them, not in the graceful approach of a diplomatic vessel, but with the purposeful movement of something that had decided its prey was worth the effort to catch. Captain Sarah Chen's voice came through their speakers without any request for communication protocols. "Ambassador Crethan, you have 30 seconds to explain why you thought sending spy drones to scan my ship was an appropriate way to open diplomatic negotiations." Crethan felt a chill run through his body. This human had not only detected their scanning drones, which were supposed to be invisible to all known sensors, but had also identified him personally without any formal introduction. "Captain Chen, I assure you that was not our intention. Those were standard diplomatic protocol sensors, designed to ensure safe approach distances and prevent accidental collisions." 20 seconds, came the cold response. The ambassador looked around his bridge at his diplomatic team. Beings trained in the art of peaceful negotiation. For the first time in his career, none of them had any suggestions. "Please, Captain, we genuinely wish to establish peaceful relations between our peoples. The Galactic Council offers friendship, trade agreements, and mutual protection to all intelligent species." 10 seconds. Crethan made a desperate decision. "What do you want from us?" There was a pause, and when Captain Chen spoke again, her voice carried something that made the hair on every mammalian crew member stand on end. It was amusement, but the kind of amusement a cat might feel while playing with a wounded mouse. "That's a much better question, Ambassador. What we want is simple. We want you to stop pretending you're in charge of anything." "I don't understand." "Let me explain it to you in terms your diplomatic mind can process. Your council represents civilizations that have forgotten what survival actually means. You've created a nice, safe sandbox where everyone plays by agreed-upon rules, and you've convinced yourselves that this sandbox represents the real universe." The Terror's edge moved closer, and as it did, the Harmony's voice's instruments began malfunctioning, not from any directed attack but simply from proximity to the human vessel. "Captain, we have built a peaceful galactic civilization that has lasted for thousands of years. Surely that represents genuine progress and wisdom." "You've built a nursery," Captain Chen corrected, "and nurseries are fine as long as everyone remembers that there's a real world outside where actual predators live." "Are you threatening us?" "I'm educating you. Your council controls maybe 3% of this galaxy. All of it in the safest, most resource-rich, most protected regions. You've never had to deal with the things that live in the dark spaces between stars. The civilizations that eat other civilizations, or the phenomena that could sterilize your entire territory without even noticing you exist. Creathan felt his diplomatic training crumbling as he struggled to process what he was hearing. If such threats exist, why haven't we encountered them? Because humans have been dealing with them for the past 1,000 years, keeping them away from your precious sandbox. Did you really think the universe was naturally this safe and peaceful? The implications hit the ambassador like a physical blow. You're saying, you've been protecting us? Not protecting, hunting, there's a difference. Protection implies you have value that we care about preserving. Hunting means we kill things that might eventually threaten things we actually do care about. And what do you care about? Other humans. And occasionally species that prove they're worth caring about. Your council so far has provided no evidence that they fall into that category. Creathan's aide, Silvera, leaned over to whisper urgently in his ear. Sir, our long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout this entire sector. Whatever the humans have been fighting out here, it's big. The ambassador straightened, trying to regain some semblance of diplomatic control. Captain Chen, if you've been hunting threats to galactic civilization, surely we can work together. The Council has resources, technology, and the unified support of hundreds of worlds. You have bureaucracy, obsolete weapons, and the unified support of hundreds of worlds that have never faced a real threat. Do you know what we call civilizations like yours in the dark spaces? What? Appetizers. The terror's edge suddenly accelerated, moving past the Harmony's voice so quickly that the diplomatic vessel's artificial gravity systems failed for several seconds. As it passed, every piece of electronic equipment on the ship briefly displayed the same message. Territory marked. Prey cataloged. Hunting resumes. When their systems came back online, Captain Chen's voice filled their ship one final time. Ambassador Creathan, you want to establish diplomatic relations? Here are your options. Option 1. Your council acknowledges that human authority supersedes council authority in all matters relating to external threats. Option 2. We reclassify council space as a hunting preserve and start teaching your enemies where to find you. Captain, please. We can negotiate something more reasonable. Those are the only two options, Ambassador. We're not negotiating. We're informing you of the new reality. Your council has 72 hours to decide which option they prefer. The transmission cut off, and the terror's edge disappeared, not by jumping to hyperspace, but by simply fading from reality like it had never been there. The Harmony's voice sat alone in empty space, its crew struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Creathan, who had never failed a diplomatic mission in 50 years of service, stared at his instruments and realized that everything he understood about galactic politics had just become irrelevant. Sir, Silvera said quietly, what do we tell the council? The ambassador was quiet for a long time, reviewing the conversation in his mind and trying to find some way to soften its implications. But there was no diplomatic way to report that the Galactic Council had just been presented with a choice between submission and extermination by a species they had never heard of. We tell them the truth, he said finally. We tell them that we just discovered we're not the apex civilization in this galaxy. We tell them that something has been keeping us safe without our knowledge, and that protection has conditions. As the Harmony's voice began its journey back to Council space, emergency communications started flooding their systems. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of human ships appearing at every major Council military installation, broadcasting the same 72-hour ultimatum. The humans weren't just making demands of a single diplomatic mission. They were simultaneously informing every significant military and political leader in Council space that the old order was over. Creathan realized that this wasn't a first contact situation at all. It was a revelation. The humans had been out there all along, fighting wars the Council didn't even know existed, and now, for reasons they hadn't explained, they had decided that the Council needed to know the truth about their place in the universe. The question that terrified him was what had changed. What threat was coming that made it necessary for the humans to reveal themselves and demand Council submission? As if in answer to his thoughts, their long-range sensors detected something at the very edge of scanning range. Something massive, something alien, and something that was moving toward Council space with unmistakable hostile intent. The 72-hour deadline suddenly made perfect sense. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 18 hours straight, and tempers were fraying across species lines. Representatives who had worked together peacefully for decades now shouted at each other in languages their translation systems struggled to process. Counselor Prime, Veldara's crystalline form had lost much of its usual luminescence, a sure sign of extreme stress among her people. Around the great circular chamber, holographic displays showed tactical assessments from every major military installation in Council space, and the news was universally terrifying. Admiral Zexthai stood at the center of the chamber, his blue skin now almost gray with exhaustion. As the highest-ranking military officer present, he had been tasked with presenting the Council's strategic options. The problem was, after 18 hours of analysis, he wasn't sure they had any. "Fellow councilors," he began, his voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge, "our military advisors have completed their assessment of human capabilities based on the encounters of the past week. I must inform you that our situation is far worse than we initially understood." A murmur of fear rippled through the assembly. Counselor Thexmar of the Warrior Worlds leaned forward aggressively. "Explain." "We have identified 73 separate human vessels operating in Council space. Each one demonstrates technology that exceeds our capabilities by margins we cannot accurately measure. Their ships appear to operate on principles that our physicists describe as aggressively impossible." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked Counselor Yilnara, her prey species instincts making her voice sharp with anxiety. Admiral Zexthai activated a holographic display that showed the energy readings from human ships. The numbers made several counselors gasp in shock. A single human vessel generates more energy than our largest dreadnoughts while showing no detectable power source. Their weapons ignore our shielding technology entirely, and their scanning capabilities can penetrate our most classified security systems as if they didn't exist. "Surely our superior numbers count for something," Counselor Mordain protested. "We have over 10,000 warships in the combined Council fleet." "Yes," the Admiral replied grimly. "And according to our tactical computers, all 10,000 of our warships combined represent approximately 12% of the firepower displayed by a single human vessel." Silence fell over the chamber like a burial shroud. These were beings who had conquered star systems, who had built an empire spanning dozens of sectors. The idea that their entire military might was insignificant compared to a single enemy ship was almost impossible to process. Counselor Prime Veldara's voice cut through the silence. "What are our options?" Admiral Zexthai looked around the chamber at faces representing the finest leadership in known space and realized that he was about to deliver news that would change everything they understood about their place in the universe. "We have 3 options," he said slowly. "First, we can attempt to negotiate a more favorable agreement with the humans. Second, we can evacuate Council space entirely and hope they allow us to relocate somewhere else in the galaxy. Third, we can fight." "And your assessment of each option?" "Negotiation appears unlikely to succeed. The humans have made their position clear. Submit or be destroyed. They don't seem interested in compromise." "What about evacuation?" The Admiral's expression grew even more grim. "Our long-range sensors have detected human vessels at distances we previously thought impossible to reach. Conservative estimates suggest they have operational capability throughout at least 30% of the known galaxy. There may be nowhere to run to." Counselor Thexmar slammed his armored fist on his podium. "Then we fight. We have never surrendered to anyone in 10,000 years of Drakmarian history." "With respect, Counselor," Admiral Zexthai replied, "fighting the humans would not be warfare. It would be suicide with extra steps." "Explain." The Admiral activated another display, this one showing tactical analysis of human weapons. "Our computers have analyzed the destruction of the probe ships near the Harmony's voice. The weapons used didn't simply destroy the probes. They convinced matter to stop existing. Our physicists are still trying to understand how that's possible." "You're telling us that human weapons can simply delete things from reality?" "That's the most basic interpretation, yes. But the implications are worse. If they can manipulate matter at the quantum level, there's no telling what else they might be capable of. Our defensive strategies are built around known physical laws. The humans appear to treat physical laws as suggestions." Counselor Yilnara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Are we certain they're really planning to destroy us if we refuse their demands?" "Unknown," Admiral Zexthai admitted. However, we have received intelligence that makes their ultimatum more understandable. What intelligence? The Admiral paused, knowing that what he was about to say would terrify them even more than the news about human capabilities. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures approaching Council space from the galactic rim. Based on the patterns and energy outputs, we believe we're looking at an invasion force. Whose invasion force? Unknown. The technology appears to be completely alien, unlike anything in our databases. But the energy signatures suggest vessels that dwarf our largest ships, and there are hundreds of them. The implications hit the assembled counselors like a physical blow. Counselor Prime Veldara's crystalline form actually cracked, hairline fractures appearing across her surface as she processed the terrible mathematics of their situation. You're saying that while we're dealing with the human ultimatum, someone else is preparing to invade our space? It appears so, yes. And based on the timing, we believe the humans are aware of this approaching threat. Are you suggesting that the human ultimatum is connected to this invasion? Admiral Zexthai nodded grimly. It's the only explanation that makes sense. The humans have been operating in dark space, fighting threats we didn't even know existed. Now something big enough to concern them is heading our way, and they're demanding authority to coordinate our defenses. The chamber erupted in confused voices as representatives tried to process this information. Some demanded more details about the approaching threat. Others insisted that the human ultimatum was still unacceptable. A few suggested that the Council should attempt to contact the approaching aliens directly. Through the chaos, Counselor Mordane's voice cut clearly. Even if this is true, even if the humans have been protecting us from external threats, we cannot simply surrender our sovereignty to a species we've never heard of. What do you suggest? Asked Admiral Zexthai. We attempt a fourth option. We make contact with this approaching force ourselves. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Perhaps they're not hostile at all. The Admiral's expression grew even more worried. Counselor, I would strongly advise against that course of action. Why? Because according to our analysis, the approaching vessels are following courses that will take them directly through inhabited Council worlds. If their intentions were peaceful, they would be following shipping lanes and broadcasting standard approach signals. Instead, they're moving in formation patterns that our tactical computers recognize as seek and destroy. You're certain? As certain as we can be without direct contact. But there's something else that concerns me even more. What? Admiral Zexthai activated a final display, showing long-range sensor readings from the past month. For the past 30 days, we've been detecting weapons discharges in deep space. Massive energy releases consistent with large-scale combat. The humans have been fighting something out there, and based on the intensity of the battles, it hasn't been going well. The terrible implication hung in the air like poison gas. If the humans, with their impossible technology and casual dismissal of physical laws, were struggling against whatever was approaching, what chance did the Council have? Counselor Prime Veldara stood slowly, her cracked crystalline form reflecting the chamber lights in patterns that spoke of deep pain and difficult decisions. Fellow counselors, she said, her ancient voice carrying the weight of impending doom. We face a choice that will define the future of our civilization. We can maintain our pride and our sovereignty, and likely face extinction when this unknown threat arrives. Or we can accept human authority and hope that their protection proves more effective than their ultimatum suggests. There has to be another way, Counselor Mordane protested. If there is, we haven't found it, Admiral Zexthai replied. Our best military minds have been working on this problem for days, and every scenario they run ends the same way. Without human assistance, Council space falls to whatever is coming. How long do we have? The Admiral consulted his data displays. At current approach speeds, the unknown vessels will reach the outer edges of Council space in approximately 6 standard weeks. The human ultimatum expires in 47 hours. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Even if the Council could somehow develop new weapons, new strategies, or new alliances in 6 weeks, they had less than 2 days to decide whether they would have the chance to try. Counselor Thexmar spoke into the silence, his warrior's pride warring with his species' survival instincts. If we accept human authority, what guarantees do we have that they will honor their protection agreement? None, Admiral Zexthai admitted. We would be entirely dependent on their goodwill. And if we refuse, then we face whatever's coming alone, with weapons that are apparently inadequate and strategies that assume Our enemies follow the same physical laws we do. The chamber fell silent again as hundreds of the galaxy's finest leaders contemplated a choice between submission and extinction. Outside the great windows of the council chamber, the lights of Zenith 7 twinkled peacefully in the darkness, representing a civilization that had thrived for millennia through cooperation, diplomacy, and mutual respect. All of that was about to end one way or another. Counselor Prime Veldara looked around the chamber at the faces of her fellow leaders and saw her own fear reflected in their expressions. They had built something beautiful and peaceful, and now they had to choose between abandoning it voluntarily or having it destroyed by forces they couldn't comprehend. "We will vote," she announced, "all in favor of accepting the human ultimatum and placing Council military forces under human authority. Indicate your position." As the votes were tallied, Admiral Zexthai found himself hoping that they were making the right choice, because if they were wrong, they would discover their mistake when the unknown invasion force arrived in 6 weeks, and by then it would be too late to change their minds. The vote had been closer than anyone expected. 127 in favor of accepting human authority, 94 against, and 23 abstentions. It was barely a majority, but it was enough. The Galactic Council had officially surrendered to a species they had never heard of until a week ago. Admiral Zexthai stood in the communications center of Nexus Prime Station, preparing to transmit the Council's decision to Captain Sarah Chen. Around him, his staff worked quietly, their movements carrying the subdued energy of beings who had just witnessed the end of everything they had known. "Captain Chen," he began, his voice formal and careful, "the Galactic Council has voted to accept your terms. We place our military forces under human authority in matters relating to external threats." The response came immediately, and Admiral Zexthai was surprised to detect something like relief in Captain Chen's voice. "Good choice, Admiral. You just bought your civilization a chance to survive the next few months. Prepare for human liaison officers to begin arriving at all major Council installations within the next 12 hours. Captain, before we proceed, the Council has questions about the nature of this protection arrangement." "I'm sure they do. What specifically do they want to know?" "How many human worlds are there? What is the extent of human space? And most importantly, what is the exact nature of the threat approaching our territory?" There was a pause, and when Captain Chen spoke again, her voice carried an amusement that made Admiral Zexthai's skin crawl. "Admiral, you're asking the wrong questions, but I suppose it's time you understood what you just agreed to. Prepare to receive data transfer." The Terror's Edge transmitted a data package that nearly overloaded Nexus Prime's computer systems. As the information was processed and displayed, Admiral Zexthai felt his understanding of the galaxy shift in ways that left him dizzy. The first set of files contained star charts that showed human presence throughout the galaxy. Not the limited, cautious expansion that characterized most civilizations, but aggressive, comprehensive coverage that spanned sectors the Council had never even explored. "Captain," Admiral Zexthai said slowly, "these charts show human operations in over 60% of the galaxy. How is that possible?" "We've been spacefaring for about 1,200 years, Admiral. When we discovered we weren't alone in the universe, we made a decision that most species don't make." "What decision?" "We decided that the universe was big enough to share, but only if everyone understood who was in charge of keeping it safe." The next set of files showed combat reports from battles fought in regions of space the Council had never heard of. The scale of the conflicts was staggering, fleets numbering in the thousands, weapons that could sterilize entire solar systems, and enemies with technology that made even human capabilities seem limited. "You've been fighting these wars for over a millennium?" Admiral Zexthai asked in amazement. "Fighting and winning," Captain Chen corrected. "Though winning doesn't always mean what you think it means. Sometimes winning means convincing your enemies that they'd prefer to live somewhere else. Sometimes it means making them extinct. And sometimes it means teaching them to be useful." "What do you mean by useful?" "We'll get to that, Admiral. First, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Your Council controls what we call the safe zone, a region of space that's naturally protected from most of the really dangerous things that live in this galaxy. You've been living in a cosmic nursery, protected by barriers you didn't even know existed." Admiral Zexthai studied the data more carefully and realized that Council space was indeed located in what appeared to be a natural safe zone, surrounded by phenomena that would make exploration incredibly difficult for anyone using Council-level technology. You're saying we've been protected by natural barriers? Natural barriers and human intervention? We've been managing those barriers for the past 800 years, keeping the really nasty stuff from finding ways around them. What kind of nasty stuff? The data files shifted to show intelligence reports on species and phenomena that existed beyond the safe zone. Admiral Zexthai's staff gasped audibly as they reviewed the information. Swarm species that consumed entire solar systems. Machine intelligences that converted living beings into components for their ever-expanding networks. Energy beings that fed on the electromagnetic signatures of technological civilizations. And worse things so alien that human intelligence reports could only describe them as incompatible with continued existence. All of these threats are real? Admiral Zexthai asked. All of them and more. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Admiral. Most species that develop faster than light travel either learn to defend themselves effectively, or they become extinct within a few centuries. But why haven't we encountered any of these threats? Because humans have been serving as a filter between your safe zone and the rest of the galaxy. We've been hunting the things that hunt civilizations like yours. The implications were staggering. The Council had built their entire worldview around the assumption that the galaxy was naturally suited to peaceful, cooperative civilization. To learn that they had been living in a carefully maintained preserve, protected by a species they hadn't even known existed, was almost too much to process. Captain, how large is human space, really? There are currently 847 human-controlled worlds, 1,147 human alliance worlds, and approximately 12,000 worlds under various forms of human protection. Our total population is roughly 2.7 trillion beings. Admiral Zexthai noted the word choice. Not all humans are genetically human anymore, Admiral. When you spend 1,200 years expanding across the galaxy, you learn that evolution is a tool like any other. We've modified ourselves to survive in environments that would kill baseline humans, and we've incorporated useful traits from other species we've encountered. You've been changing yourselves? Adapting. It's what humans do best. We don't just explore hostile environments. We become suited to them. Some human populations can survive in hard vacuum. Others can process radiation as a food source. A few can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Admiral Zexthai felt his worldview crumbling completely. Are you still human? We're what humans chose to become, which brings us to the real reason for this conversation, Admiral. Which is, the threat approaching your space isn't just another aggressive species. It's something we've been fighting for the past 2 centuries. Something we call the Erasers. The data files shifted again, showing intelligence on an enemy unlike anything in Admiral Zexthai's experience. The Erasers weren't a species in any conventional sense. They were a phenomenon, a force that moved through the galaxy systematically removing civilizations from existence. They don't conquer, Captain Chen explained. They don't enslave or convert or absorb. They simply make civilizations stop having ever existed. Planets, people, cultures, history, everything just disappears from reality. How is that possible? We're still trying to understand it completely. But the effect is real. Entire sectors of the galaxy that once held thriving civilizations now contain nothing but empty space and confused astrophysicists wondering why their star charts don't match what they're observing. Admiral Zexthai stared at the data, trying to comprehend something that violated every principle of rational existence. How do you fight something like that? Very carefully and with weapons that most civilizations consider impossible to build. The Erasers can delete conventional matter from reality, but they have trouble with matter that exists in states that shouldn't be possible. Is that why your ships seem to violate physical laws? Our ships don't violate physical laws, Admiral. They operate according to physical laws that most civilizations never discover, because those laws only apply in situations where conventional physics breaks down. Such as when you're fighting enemies that can edit reality. When your opponents can simply decide that your weapons don't exist, you need weapons that exist in ways they can't easily delete. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Chief Science Officer Moradin. Admiral, we're detecting incoming vessels. Multiple contacts approaching at impossible velocities. The Erasers? Admiral Zexthai asked Captain Chen. No, Admiral. Those are human ships. My colleagues are arriving to begin preparing your defenses. On the tactical display, dozens of vessels began materializing throughout Council space. Each one demonstrated the same reality-bending characteristics as the Terror's Edge, appearing without transition and moving in ways that made Council sensors struggle to track them. "How many ships?" Admiral Zexthai asked his science officer. Admiral, I'm reading over 300 vessels, and they're still arriving." Captain Chen's voice carried satisfaction. "The Advanced Defense Fleet will be positioning ships at every major Council installation and population center." "Advanced Fleet?" Admiral Zexthai felt a new kind of fear growing in his chest. "Admiral, did you think the Terror's Edge was a major warship?" "We're a light reconnaissance vessel with a skeleton crew of 200. The ships arriving now are actual combat units." "How many crew on a human combat ship?" "Depends on the class. Destroyers carry about 50,000. Battleships carry around 300,000. World ships carry anywhere from 50 million to 2 billion, depending on their configuration." The numbers were beyond anything Admiral Zexthai could have imagined. "Your ships carry populations larger than most Council worlds?" "Our ships are populations, Admiral. When you've been spacefaring for 1,200 years, the line between spacecraft and civilization becomes somewhat blurred." As the human fleet deployed throughout Council space, Admiral Zexthai realized that everything he had understood about galactic politics, military power, and the nature of civilization itself had been wrong. The Council wasn't a significant galactic power. They were a small, protected population that had been allowed to develop in safety, while real civilizations fought wars beyond their comprehension. "Captain Chen," he said finally, "what happens to us now?" "That depends on you, Admiral. You can continue to exist as you have with human protection and guidance. You can choose to join our expansion efforts and learn to survive in the real galaxy, or you can refuse to adapt and gradually become irrelevant as the universe moves on without you." "And the erasers?" "Will arrive in approximately 5 weeks. By then, we'll have determined whether Council civilization is worth preserving, or whether it's safer to evacuate your populations to more secure locations." The connection ended, leaving Admiral Zexthai staring at displays showing human vessels throughout his sector. In the space of a single conversation, he had learned that his entire civilization was essentially a protected nature preserve, that the galaxy was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and that humanity was not just a species, but an evolved form of civilization that treated the impossible as routine. As he watched human ships begin their work of fortifying Council space, Admiral Zexthai understood that the old galaxy was gone forever. Whatever emerged from the coming conflict would be something entirely new, shaped by forces and capabilities that the Council was only just beginning to comprehend. 3 weeks had passed since the human fleet's arrival, and Nexus Prime Station bore no resemblance to its former self. What had once been the Council's most advanced military installation now looked like a construction site run by beings who treated physics as a mild suggestion rather than a fundamental law. Admiral Zexthai stood in what used to be his command center, watching human engineers work with technology that made his best scientists weep with frustration. The humans had not simply upgraded Council systems, they had replaced them with devices that operated on principles that seemed designed to give conventional physics a nervous breakdown. "The quantum resonance stabilizers are online," reported Chief Engineer Krolnix, a Drakmarian whose warrior pride had been systematically demolished by watching human technicians perform impossible tasks with casual competence. "I still don't understand how they work." "None of us do," Admiral Zexthai replied. "The humans have been very polite about explaining their technology, but their explanations assume knowledge we don't possess." Through the command center's new viewing ports, which somehow showed multiple dimensions simultaneously, Admiral Zexthai could see human warships positioned throughout the system. Each one was a masterpiece of impossible engineering, their hulls decorated with symbols that seemed to move when observed directly. The largest vessel, identified as the Humanity's Wrath, was roughly the size of a small moon and carried what the humans described as a modest defensive complement of 6 million crew members. Watching it maneuver through space was like watching a celestial body that had decided to ignore gravity, inertia, and several other fundamental forces. "Sir," Communications Officer Yilneth called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Chen. She's requesting your presence on the Terror's Edge for a strategic briefing." Admiral Zexthai nodded and made his way to the transport bay, where a human shuttle waited. The craft looked like it had been assembled from crystallized starlight and aggressive mathematics, its hull bearing the same reality-bending characteristics as all human technology. The brief journey to the Terror's edge gave him time to reflect on how much had changed. Council space now hosted the largest military buildup in galactic history, but instead of feeling protected, Admiral Zextai felt increasingly small. The humans treated their impossible technology as routine, their casual mastery of forces that should not exist serving as a constant reminder that the Council's entire civilization was operating on a level that humans had outgrown. Centuries ago, the Terror's Edge's interior was even more disorienting than its exterior. Corridors that seemed to extend forever while somehow fitting inside a ship that was only a few kilometers long, gravity that flowed like water, allowing crew members to walk on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. And everywhere the casual presence of human technology that made the impossible look mundane. Captain Sarah Chen met him in what she called the Tactical Center, a room that contained what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. Stars, planets, civilizations, and military forces were all displayed in perfect detail, with information that should have taken centuries to gather. Admiral Zextai, she greeted him with something that might have been a smile if it hadn't contained so much predatory satisfaction. Thank you for coming. It's time you understood exactly what you've gotten yourselves into. I'm beginning to suspect I don't want to know, Admiral Zextai replied. Probably not, but ignorance isn't going to help anyone survive the next few weeks. The erasers will arrive in 11 days and we need to discuss your civilization's future. Captain Chen gestured to the galactic display, and it shifted to show the approaching eraser force in detail. What Admiral Zextai saw made his skin turn completely gray with terror. The eraser fleet consisted of structures that hurt to look at directly, geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow. They moved in formations that followed no pattern Admiral Zextai could understand, their very presence seeming to cause reality to flinch away from them. How many ships? He asked. That's the wrong question, Admiral. The erasers don't use ships in any sense that you would understand. Those are more like reality editing tools. Each one can remove entire solar systems from existence by convincing the universe that they were never there in the first place. How do you fight something like that? With extreme violence and technologies that exist specifically because they shouldn't be possible, Captain Chen replied cheerfully. Would you like to see our battle plan? The display shifted again, showing the human defensive positions throughout Council space. Admiral Zextai realized that what he had thought was a defensive fleet was actually the most complex military operation he had ever seen. We're not planning to fight the erasers in Council space, Captain Chen explained. We're planning to fight them in all space across multiple dimensions simultaneously, using weapons that operate according to physics that won't be discovered for another 1,000 years. That sounds impossible. Most effective strategies do. The key to fighting reality editors is to use realities they can't easily edit. We're going to engage them in battlegrounds that exist in quantum superposition, using weapons that fire concepts instead of energy, and deploying tactics that are mathematically impossible, but practically effective. Admiral Zexithai stared at the display, trying to understand battle plans that seemed designed by insane geniuses. What do you need from the Council forces? Honestly? Stay out of the way and try not to get accidentally deleted from reality. Your ships aren't equipped to survive in the kind of physics-optional environment we'll be creating. Then why did you demand Council submission if you don't need our help in the battle? Captain Chen's expression grew serious. Because the battle is only the beginning, Admiral. Win or lose, this conflict is going to change the fundamental nature of how civilizations exist in this galaxy, and we need to know that Council space won't become a problem for us afterward. What do you mean? The erasers aren't just trying to delete your civilization, Admiral. They're trying to delete the entire concept of safe zones in the galaxy. They want to force all civilizations to either evolve to their level or cease to exist. And you oppose this? We oppose the methodology. Humans believe in evolution through conflict, but we prefer that conflict to be educational rather than terminal. The erasers want to teach through extinction. We prefer to teach through controlled application of overwhelming force. Admiral Zextai considered this distinction and found it less comforting than Captain Chen seemed to think it should be. What happens to us if you win? That depends on what you choose to become. Your civilization can continue to exist in its current form, but only if you accept permanent human protection and guidance. Alternatively, you can choose to evolve. Evolve how? Learn to survive in the real galaxy. Develop technology that can function in impossible conditions. Modify your species to handle environments that would currently kill you. Basically become capable of existing without constant protection. And if we choose neither? Captain Chen's smile returned, and it was not reassuring. Then you gradually become irrelevant as the universe moves beyond your ability to participate in it. It's not extinction exactly. More like voluntary obsolescence. The implications were staggering. The Council faced a choice between dependence, transformation, or irrelevance. There was no option to simply continue as they had been. Captain, may I ask why humans care what happens to us at all? You could simply evacuate our populations and use our space for your own purposes. Because, Captain Chen said, activating a new display that showed human territorial expansion over the past millennium. We've learned that diversity makes civilization stronger. Humans excel at impossible warfare and adaptive evolution, but we're not as good at some other things, such as peaceful administration, cultural preservation, diplomatic solutions to problems that don't require violence. Your council has developed skills that complement human capabilities. A partnership could be beneficial to both our species. Partnership implies equality. It implies mutual benefit. The equality part you'll have to earn by becoming something more than what you currently are. The conversation was interrupted by alerts throughout the ship. Admiral Zexthai could hear the sound of human crew members moving to battle stations, their voices carrying an excitement that was distinctly unsettling. The erasers are early, Captain Chen announced, studying readings that Admiral Zexthai's eyes couldn't properly process. They'll be here in 6 hours instead of 11 days. They've learned to move through time as well as space. Is that bad for your battle plans? It's inconvenient, but we planned for this possibility. Admiral, you need to return to Nexus Prime immediately. What happens next is going to be difficult to observe from close range. As Admiral Zexthai was escorted back to his shuttle, he caught glimpses of the Terror's Edge preparing for combat. Human crew members were activating systems that seemed to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. Weapons powered up with energy signatures that made space-time itself seem nervous. And throughout the ship, beings who had evolved beyond baseline humanity prepared to fight enemies who could edit reality itself. The shuttle ride back to Nexus Prime took place in a universe that was already beginning to change. Space-time itself seemed to be developing a nervous twitch as human and eraser technologies began to interact across vast distances. Stars flickered between existing and not existing. Planets appeared in orbits where they had never been, then faded away like forgotten dreams. As Admiral Zexthai reached his command center, the battle began in earnest. What he witnessed through the station's enhanced sensors would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. The humans didn't fight the erasers so much as they out-impossibly them. Where the erasers used weapons that deleted things from reality, the humans used weapons that created realities where their enemies had never existed in the first place. Where the erasers moved through dimensions that shouldn't exist, the humans fought from dimensions that were mathematically prohibited. The battle lasted 17 hours and took place across roughly 40% of known space simultaneously. When it was over, the Eraser Force had been not so much defeated as convinced to exist somewhere else entirely. Admiral Zexthai found himself staring at a galaxy that had been subtly but permanently altered by forces beyond his comprehension. The safe zone that had protected Council space for millennia was gone, replaced by something far more robust but also far more complex. Captain Chen to Admiral Zexthai, came the transmission from the Terror's Edge. The immediate threat has been resolved. We need to discuss the new arrangements. As Admiral Zexthai prepared for what he suspected would be the most important conversation in Council history, he realized that his civilization now faced its greatest challenge. Not extinction or conquest, but the opportunity to become something more than they had ever imagined possible. The question was whether they were brave enough to take that opportunity, or whether they would choose the safety of permanent dependence on beings who had evolved beyond their ability to understand. Outside his command center windows, human ships began the process of rebuilding local space-time to more secure specifications. Their casual mastery of impossible technologies, serving as a constant